What's going on, guys? Check this
I
out.
found a fucking snake. I posted it up on Twitter like a week or so ago. A snake that has a tail that looks like a fake spider.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that fucking thing?
I'm not sure. Do you know the species of it? I know the species. If you said the name.
I think it's from Iran. And it's a rattlesnake.
Scaled viper?
Yeah.
Scaled pit viper, is that it?
Yeah, it's a viper, not a rattlesnake.
Horned viper.
Yeah. Oh, horned viper.
Have you seen that thing?
I know what they are, yeah.
It's
incredible.
It looks like a spider.
Right.
And it tricks birds into coming down and try to snatch the spider. Here we go. The Iranian spider
Look at that.
viper. Spider-tailed viper. Like, look at its tail. That is crazy. I mean, I'm looking at that in a video, and it looks like a bug.
Right.
And so this thing moves its tail, and it perfectly blends into the rock around it. Like, look at that.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that amount of camouflage and adaptation, like, how does that happen?
It's
like,
incredible.
Look at this. And the bird's like, what was that almost got me?
Yeah, it's insane.
What an adaptation.
It's unbelievable. I mean, the fact that creatures can create that without, it's not like they're doing it knowingly.
Right.
Some handful of snakes at one time started waggling their tail and realizing that birds came in.
Yes.
Right. And then over generational time, this tail evolved little spikes and little things, and all of a sudden you have this whole population of animals that look like that. Like, that's insane.
I mean, what is it?
Okay, I have some questions. First of all, how do you know that to be true? Are there any transitional fossils to verify that theory? Are there any examples of animals adding features to their body that they once never had? Is there another possible explanation? You see, atheists always accuse Christians of God of the gaps, but their God and rescuer is time. When they don't know something to be true, they just throw in time. Time explains it all. He said that a population of snakes began wagging their tail and saw that it lured birds. So over generations and generations, these snakes grew spikes on their tails. The question is, where did that new genetic information come from? Now, I'm not a scientist, but it's just common sense. Now, when I first saw this clip, I had to look up the snake myself, and I was truly amazed at how realistic this snake's tail mimics the look of a spider. Animal mimicry is a real thing, and it's a testament of God's infinite wisdom and creative power.
The Ophrys opifera, commonly known as the bee orchid, is a marvel to behold, and anyone observing one would likely be unsurprised to hear its designated household name. Interestingly, ophrys is a word from ancient Greek meaning eyebrow. In Latin, opifera means bee-bringing. Both words will make sense as we discover more about them. Now, these orchids look like a bee in shape, size, and general coloration. It also feels like a bee, kind of fuzzy. But most amazing is that they also produce pheromones that smell like a bee, virtually indistinguishable from the insect's natural pheromones. Yes, they smell like a female bee in heat, so to speak. To keep this episode rated PG, let's just describe how these orchids reproduce in somewhat simplistic but accurate terms. Picture Mr. B flying around one day when he catches a whiff of perfume and, looking down, sees what he thinks is a female bee. First, we should note that these plants have both male and female parts, per se. The male part is the pollinia, and the female part is the stigma. The part of the bee orchid that Mr. B lands on, that looks like a female bee, is called the labellum, which is a specially designed landing platform. And because of the way he mounts this platform in an effort to mate with the flower, his head will bump into the pollinia, which has a special glue that attaches a structure containing the pollinia to his head. When Mr. B decides to leave, a special mechanism in the structure that is now stuck to his head, called the caudicle, bends the pollinia down to a more horizontal position. Undaunted by the acquisition of this strange new hat he's acquired, Mr. B carries on his day. Of course, as a typical male with a one-track mind, he then looks down and sees what he thinks is another female bee. This time, when Mr. B lands, the pollinia, the male part stuck to his head, is now aligned to contact with the stigma, the female part. And voila, we get more bee orchids. Scientifically, this mechanism is called pseudocopulation, the name given to a situation in which individuals interact in a manner resembling intercourse, but no real copulation occurs. The typical evolutionary explanations for this amazing orchid's supposed existence contains mostly simplistic appeals to natural selection over millions of years, with little to no concrete explanations for how it could have happened, like the following. Ophrys epiphyra is an attractive orchid, resembling a bee and two other inner tepals that look like antennae. The whole flower thus mimics an insect. In biology, the term mimicry refers to cases where natural selection has favored a resemblance between individuals of different species. So the big question is this: how can an orchid without eyes, a brain, tactile senses, or a nose to differentiate between scents put together such a sophisticated assemblage of parts and functionality through random processes essential for its survival? The Ophrys epiphyra plant has never been able to feel or see a bee that's landed on it. God's created an incredibly ordered world, and its inhabitants truly bear witness to his existence and his greatness. Orchids aren't observing bee shapes and colors to imitate. They don't have chem labs to concoct various versions and blends of chemical compounds to find a female bee's perfect sex pheromones. They aren't feeling bees so that they know to be fuzzy. If certain plants need bees to reproduce, how are they reproducing before bees existed, even by one generation? If bees weren't needed for these plants to reproduce, why bother evolving all these mechanisms that require extra resources and thereby vulnerability to extinction should bees vanish geographically or permanently? Evolution is supposed to be survival fitness. Requiring such a delicate and cooperative unity between these living things is highly dangerous from a survival standpoint.
You know, I find it laughable when people argue anything other than the creator made these plants and animals. Here's the fact. There's a snake that has a tail that looks like a spider. Either God designed it or it happened by chance. There's a flower that looks like a bee, feels like a bee, smells like a bee, has reproductive parts that only a bee can facilitate. Either God designed that or it happened by chance. Here's the question: which viewpoint requires more leaps of faith? That these things happen miraculously, inexplicably, by chance, or God, infinite with wisdom, creative power, and knowledge, designed these things how they are. Romans 1:20 says, "For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." The evidence for the invisible God is in the visible things that we see, the things that he made, creation, the plants, the animals. They testify of his divine power. Morality testifies of his nature. Occam's razor says, when you have two competing ideas, always choose the simpler one. You have the scientific impossibility that nothing created everything, and you're burdened with the responsibility of trying to explain where matter came from and all these diverse animals and insects and all this stuff, or God created everything and all the things we see is evidence of God's existence and his power. But don't just take my word for it. If you want more proof, listen to these three guys right here. If you enjoyed this video, you want more content like this, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel and like this video. I'll be back next week with another one. This is Pastor Frederick. This is About a Book. Peace.